The cold fluorescent lights of the hospital waiting room buzzed overhead, somehow making me feel even more nauseous than I already was. My trembling fingers scrolled through the contacts on my phone, vision blurred by unshed tears. 3 pregnancy tests, and now a doctor's confirmation had shattered whatever remaining hope I'd clung to. I was definitely pregnant, and definitely alone. "Ms. Collins?" The nurse's voice pulled me from my spiral of panic. "Your blood work is complete. The doctor has prescribed prenatal vitamins." She handed me a small paper bag and a sympathetic smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I'd seen that look before. Single, pregnant, and obviously overwhelmed. Another statistic. "Thank you," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Outside, rain pummeled the parking lot, turning the world into a gray blur that matched my mood perfectly. I huddled under the small awning, clutching my coat tighter around my body, around the tiny life growing inside me that I had no idea how to provide for. 6 weeks pregnant. The timing confirmed what I already knew. Ryan had left me with more than a broken heart and emptied bank account. My thumb hovered over his name in my phone. I'd deleted his number weeks ago after discovering he'd emptied our joint account and disappeared with my roommate. But in my desperate state, I'd recovered it from an old text. Not to beg him to come back. I wasn't that pathetic, but he needed to know. He needed to take responsibility. I hit the call button before I could lose my nerve, pulling my jacket tighter as the wind picked up, whipping cold raindrops against my face. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Each ring twisted my stomach tighter. Would he even pick up? What would I say? "Who is this?" The voice that answered wasn't Ryan's. It was deep, slightly accented and unmistakably annoyed. I pulled the phone away, checking the screen. I'd hit the contact above Ryan's, a number I didn't recognize. In my emotional state, I'd misdialed. "I'm sorry," I stammered. "Wrong number." I moved to hang up when his voice came again, sharper now. "Wait. How did you get this number?" Something in his tone made me freeze. I don't know. It must be saved in my phone. I meant to call someone else." A heavy silence followed, broken only by what sounded like muffled conversation on his end. I should have hung up, but something kept me waiting, the rain now soaking through my thin jacket. "You're crying." It wasn't a question. I brushed at my cheeks, embarrassed that a stranger could hear my distress through the phone. "I'm fine." "You're lying." Again, stated as fact. "What's your name?" Against all better judgment, I answered. "Emily." "Emily," he repeated, my name sounding somehow different in his mouth, waited. "Who were you trying to call?" I don't know why I told him. Maybe it was the hormones, or the desperate loneliness crushing me from the inside out. "The father of my baby. I just found out I'm pregnant and he's gone." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. I heard a car door slam in the background of his call, followed by the smooth purr of an expensive engine. "Where are you right now?" he asked, his voice suddenly softer but somehow more intense. "At Memorial Hospital, but I'm leaving." "Look, I'm sorry I bothered you. Stay there." The command in his voice was so absolute I actually stopped walking. "Excuse me?" "Stay exactly where you are, Emily. I'm sending a car." I laughed nervously. "I don't even know you." "No," he agreed, "but you will. That baby needs a father." The line went dead before I could respond. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, rain soaking through my clothes as I tried to process what had just happened. Had a complete stranger just claimed my unborn child? The absurdity of it broke through my shock, and I shoved my phone into my pocket, heading toward the bus stop. Clearly, I'd encountered some kind of lunatic. I'd block the number as soon as I got home. 20 minutes later, soaked and shivering at the bus stop, I was beginning to think the day couldn't possibly get worse. The bus was late, my apartment was across town, and my thin jacket offered little protection against the November chill. I closed my eyes, leaning against the plexiglass shelter, willing myself not to cry again. The sound of tires on wet asphalt made me look up, expecting the bus. Instead, a black Bentley with tinted windows rolled to a stop directly in front of me. My breath caught in my throat as the back door swung open, revealing nothing but darkness within. A man emerged, not completely, just enough to stand half-sheltered by the door. Even partially obscured, he commanded attention. Tall, dressed in an impeccably tailored black suit, with broad shoulders and a presence that seemed to compress the air around him. His face remained in shadow, but I could feel his eyes on me, assessing. Emily. The voice from the phone, but richer in person, wrapped around my name like dark velvet. I took an instinctive step back. How do you know I'm Emily? He stepped fully out of the car then, and I got my first clear look at him. Dark hair, cut short and precise. Sharp jawline shadowed with perfectly maintained stubble, eyes so intensely blue they seemed to pierce right through me. He was older than I'd imagined, maybe late 30s, with subtle silver at his temples that only enhanced his appearance. Behind him, I noticed another man, broad, expressionless, standing vigilant near the driver's side. There are only 2 women at this bus stop, he said, his gaze never leaving my face. And you're the one who looks like she's been crying. A tall man in a dark suit approached from behind him, opening a large umbrella and holding it over his boss. The movement was fluid, practiced, revealing a glimpse of a shoulder holster beneath a suit jacket that made my blood run cold. Who are you? I managed, hating the tremor in my voice. Alexander Volkov, he replied, as if the name should mean something to me. When I showed no recognition, something like amusement flickered across his face. Let's get you out of the rain. I'm not getting in a car with a stranger, I said, summoning whatever courage I could find. His lips curved slightly. A wise policy. But you called me Emily, by accident. There are no accidents. He extended his hand, not grabbing for me, simply offering. You're shivering, you're pregnant, and from what I can see, you're alone. Let me help you. Why would you help me? You don't know me. His expression softened marginally. Because that baby needs a father, and I'm in a position to provide what you both need. Behind him, a second bodyguard scanned the street, his attention focused everywhere except our conversation, the casual display of security, the car that probably cost more than I'd make in 10 years, the absolute confidence in Alexander's stance. All of it screamed danger and power. What exactly are you suggesting? I asked, wrapping my arms protectively around my middle. A proposition. One that would solve your problems and satisfy certain requirements of mine. He glanced at the darkening sky. But perhaps we could discuss this somewhere dry. No obligations. Just a conversation. Every instinct screamed to run. But where would I go? Back to my empty apartment with its past due rent notice? To my minimum wage job that wouldn't cover daycare? To my parents who'd made it clear that my poor decisions were no longer their concern? And underneath it all, a treacherous voice whispered, "What if this is the universe throwing you a lifeline? One conversation." I agreed reluctantly, in public. Something that might have been respect flashed in his eyes. Of course. He stepped back, giving me space to approach the car on my own terms. As I moved forward, he spoke quietly to his driver, who immediately pulled out a phone. The interior of the Bentley was like another world. Soft leather seats, the scent of expensive cologne and cedar, soft classical music playing through hidden speakers. Alexander slid in beside me, leaving a respectful distance between us. Up close, I could see the subtle details that spoke of wealth beyond anything I'd known. The platinum watch peeking from his cuff, the way his suit was clearly made for his body alone. "Tell me about Ryan," he said, as the car pulled smoothly away from the curb. I stiffened. "How do you know his name?" Alexander's expression remained neutral. "You mentioned the father of your child. I assumed that was his name. Had I?" My mind was too frazzled to remember what I'd said during our brief call. "There's nothing to tell. He's gone. With your money as well, it seems." My cheeks burned. Was I that transparent? "It doesn't matter." "On the contrary," he said, his voice hardening slightly. "It matters a great deal. Men who abandon their responsibilities deserve consequences." The casual way he spoke of consequences sent a chill through me. "Look, I appreciate the ride, but I don't understand what's happening here." "Who are you, really? And what did you mean about the baby needing a father?" Alexander studied me for a long moment before answering. "I am a businessman with interests across several industries. As for what I meant," He paused, choosing his words. I have certain obligations that would be simplified by having a family. You need security and support for your child. I'm proposing an arrangement that would benefit us both. An arrangement, I repeated, trying to process his words. You mean like marriage? Eventually, yes, after a suitable period of acquaintance. I almost laughed, but the absolute seriousness in his eyes stopped me. That's insane. We don't know each other, and people don't get married for business reasons anymore. The hint of a smile touched his lips. In my world, they do. The car slowed, pulling up to a restaurant I recognized as one of the most exclusive in the city. The kind of place where reservations were made months in advance, and the menu had no prices listed. I thought we could discuss the details over dinner, Alexander said, watching my reaction carefully, unless you'd prefer somewhere else. My stomach growled traitorously. I couldn't remember the last time I'd eaten at a real restaurant. Between rent, utilities, and now medical bills, restaurants had become an unaffordable luxury. This is fine, I said, trying to sound nonchalant. As we exited the car, I became painfully aware of my appearance. Rain-soaked hair, minimal makeup, and the worn coat I'd been meaning to replace for 2 seasons. Alexander seemed unconcerned, placing a gentle hand at the small of my back as we approached the entrance. The maitre d' recognized him immediately. Mr. Volkov, an unexpected pleasure. Your usual table? Thank you, Antoine. And please bring a selection of appetizers immediately. My guest is eating for 2. I felt my face flush as Antoine's eyes widened slightly before his professional mask returned. Of course, sir. Right this way. As we followed him through the restaurant, I noticed how conversations dimmed as we passed. People tried to look without being obvious, their curiosity almost palpable. Who was Alexander Volkov that his mere presence caused such a reaction? And more importantly, what had I gotten myself into? Our table was tucked away in a corner that offered both privacy and a clear view of the entire restaurant. Alexander pulled out my chair, waiting for me to sit before taking his own seat across from me. His bodyguards positioned themselves discreetly at separate points in the restaurant, their presence almost forgotten until you noticed how their eyes constantly surveilled the room. "You're uncomfortable," Alexander observed, as a waiter immediately appeared with water and a basket of warm bread. I'm sitting in a 5-star restaurant looking like a drowned rat, with a man I just met who's talking about marriage. Uncomfortable doesn't quite cover it. The corner of his mouth twitched. Your honesty is refreshing. It's all I have to offer, I replied, then immediately regretted how pathetic it sounded. Alexander's eyes held mine. I doubt that very much. The intensity of his gaze made me look away. I focused on the bread basket instead. Suddenly aware of how hungry I was, I reached for a piece, trying to ignore how my hand trembled slightly. Please, eat, he encouraged, gesturing to the basket. I didn't need to be told twice. The bread was still warm, with a perfect crust and soft interior that practically melted in my mouth. I closed my eyes briefly, savoring it. When I opened them, Alexander was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, something between fascination and possessiveness. It made my skin prickle with awareness. You said you're a businessman, I said, desperate to break the tension. What kind of business? Import to export, primarily. Real estate, some investment ventures. His answer was smooth, practiced. But tonight isn't about my work. Tell me about yourself, Emily. Just then, a parade of servers appeared with small plates of appetizers, saving me from having to answer immediately. They arranged what looked like a feast before us. Delicate arrangements of seafood, roasted vegetables, and things I couldn't even identify. I didn't order any of this, I whispered once they'd gone. I took the liberty. He gestured to the spread. Please, try whatever appeals to you. My stomach growled again, and I gave up any pretense of restraint. I sampled dishes cautiously at first, then with growing enthusiasm as flavors I'd never experienced exploded across my palate. Alexander ate sparingly, seeming to take more pleasure in watching me enjoy the food. You never answered my question, he said after I'd slowed down. Tell me about yourself. I dabbed at my mouth with the napkin, suddenly self-conscious. There's not much to tell. I'm 26. I work as an administrative assistant at Meridian Insurance, or I did, Until last week when they restructured my department. His eyes narrowed slightly. So you're unemployed, temporarily? I said defensively. I have interviews lined up, while pregnant, he stated, not unkindly. The reality of my situation crashed back over me. Pregnant, jobless, with barely enough savings to cover next month's rent. I set down my fork, appetite suddenly gone. I'll figure it out, I said, more to convince myself than him. I'm sure you would, Alexander replied, surprising me. You strike me as remarkably resilient. But why struggle unnecessarily when there's an alternative? You mean your arrangement? I asked, unable to keep the skepticism from my voice. He leaned forward slightly. Let me be direct, Emily. I need a wife and a family, for reasons that are both personal and professional. You need security and support. I'm proposing a mutually beneficial solution. You're talking about a marriage of convenience. Initially, yes, his gaze intensified, though I see no reason why it couldn't evolve into something more genuine, given time. I shook my head, trying to clear it. This is crazy. People don't just meet and decide to get married anymore, especially not to solve business problems. What kind of business requires a family anyway? Something shuddered in his expression. Certain circles place high value on family men. It inspires confidence, suggests stability. So I'd be, what? Window dressing? A prop to make you look respectable? The idea was both offensive and somehow hurtful, though I had no right to feel hurt by a stranger's motives. You would be my wife, he said firmly, entitled to all the respect, protection, and privileges that position entails. The way he said protection sent a small shiver down my spine. And the baby? What role would you play there? His expression softened almost imperceptibly. I would claim the child as my own, legally, financially, and in every way that matters. Your child would want for nothing the best schools, opportunities, security. And Ryan, the actual father? Something dangerous flickered in Alexander's eyes. Does he deserve consideration? The man who stole from you and left you alone while carrying his child? I looked down at my plate. No, I admitted quietly. But that doesn't change biology. Biology is the least important aspect of fatherhood, Alexander said with surprising conviction. A real father protects, provides, guides. Would Ryan do any of those things? We both knew the answer to that. Why me? I asked finally. You could marry anyone. Someone from your circles. Someone who fits into your world. Alexander considered me for a long moment. The women in my world come with complications, expectations, connections I don't need. You're independent. Straightforward. His eyes dropped briefly to my midsection. And your pregnancy provides an expedient timeline that suits my purposes. His honesty was both refreshing and slightly painful. At least he wasn't pretending this was about some instant connection or attraction. What would you expect from me? I asked, proud that my voice remained steady. Loyalty. Discretion. Your presence at certain functions. And, he paused, eyes darkening slightly, exclusivity. The implication was clear. This would be a real marriage in all senses of the word. And if I refuse, then I'll have my driver take you wherever you wish to go, and we'll part ways. He shrugged elegantly. I'm not in the habit of forcing anyone's hand, Emily. I believed him, strangely enough. Despite the surreal nature of this entire encounter, I didn't feel threatened. Overwhelmed, certainly. Confused? Absolutely. But not afraid. I need time to think, I said finally. Alexander nodded once. Reasonable. But I should warn you, I operate on compressed timelines. I'll need your answer within 48 hours. The main course arrived then, a perfectly cooked steak for him, and a delicate sea bass for me that I didn't remember ordering. As we ate, Alexander steered the conversation to lighter topics. Books, music, my hometown. He was surprisingly easy to talk to when not discussing bizarre marriage proposals. His attention focused completely on me in a way I found both flattering and unnerving. I learned he'd immigrated from Russia as a teenager, that he spoke 5 languages, that he preferred classical music, but had a secret appreciation for 80s rock ballads. Small, humanizing details that made him seem less like the intimidating figure who'd emerged from the Bentley. After declining dessert, my stomach already uncomfortably full, I excused myself to the restroom. In the elegant marble sanctuary, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. My hair had dried in unruly waves, my mascara slightly smudged beneath my eyes. I looked exactly like what I was, a woman out of her depth. "Get it together, Emily," I whispered to myself, splashing cool water on my face. "Think this through. Marriage to a virtual stranger. A man who clearly wielded significant power and influence. A man who wanted to claim my baby as his own. It was insane. Something from a bad movie plot, not real life. And yet, what were my alternatives? Struggling as a single mother, working multiple jobs just to afford daycare, moving back to my parents' house to endure their constant judgment? Or worst of all, reaching out to Ryan again, begging for support he'd never willingly give. I dried my hands and squared my shoulders. I wasn't agreeing to anything tonight. I'd take the 48 hours, weigh my options carefully. This wasn't a fairy tale, and Alexander Volkov was certainly no Prince Charming. But maybe, just maybe, he was the lifeline I desperately needed. When I returned to the table, Alexander was speaking quietly into his phone. He ended the call as I approached, standing smoothly to pull out my chair. "Everything all right?" he asked, noticing my contemplative expression. "Just processing," I admitted. He nodded, understanding without pressing further. "I've taken care of the bill. Are you ready to leave?" Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the streetlights. Alexander's car appeared instantly, as if the driver had been watching for our exit. As we approached, Alexander placed a hand lightly at the small of my back, not controlling, but protective. The simple contact sent a warmth through me that I tried desperately to ignore. "Where can I take you?" he asked, as we settled into the car's luxurious interior. I hesitated, suddenly reluctant to have him see my shabby apartment building. "Just drop me at the corner of Maple and 3rd. I can walk from there." His expression hardened. "I'll see you to your door." "That's not necessary. It is to me." His tone brooked no argument. "Your address, Emily." Reluctantly, I gave it. As the car glided through the city streets, Alexander reached into his jacket and withdrew a small card. "My private number," he said, offering it to me. "Call me directly when you've made your decision, or if you need anything at all before then." I took the card, noting the heavy stock and embossed lettering. Just a phone number. No name or title. "Thank you for dinner," I said, feeling the inadequacy of the words even as they left my mouth. "Thank you for your company," he replied formally. Then, in a slightly warmer tone, "And for considering my proposal, however unconventional it may seem." The car pulled up to my building, and I winced internally at how it must look through his eyes, the peeling paint, the flickering security light, the general air of neglect. Alexander's face revealed nothing as he exited first, then offered his hand to help me out. His bodyguard materialized, scanning the quiet street before nodding slightly to Alexander. With a shock, I realized he'd been in a second car behind us the entire time. "I'll walk you up," Alexander said, his hand returning to the small of my back. Too tired to argue further, I led him into the building and up the 3 flights of stairs. The elevator had been temporarily out of service for the 6 months I'd lived there. He said nothing about the graffiti in the stairwell or the distinct smell of marijuana seeping from 2B. At my door, I fumbled for my keys, suddenly nervous. "Well, this is me." Alexander surveyed the hallway with a slight frown. "You have my number. Use it, Emily. Whatever you decide." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. This entire evening felt dreamlike, disconnected from reality. He stepped closer then, slowly enough that I could have moved away if I wanted to. His hand came up to my face, thumb gently brushing my cheek in a gesture so tender it made my breath catch. 48 hours, he reminded me softly. Then he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the dingy hallway, leaving me standing there with my hand pressed to my cheek, and my mind in absolute chaos. Inside my apartment, I leaned against the closed door, finally allowing the full weight of the day to crash over me, pregnant, unemployed, and now with a marriage proposal from a man who screamed power, danger, and secrets. I placed Alexander's card carefully on my nightstand before changing into my oldest, most comfortable pajamas. As I slid under the covers, my phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Rest well, Emily. We'll speak soon." I didn't need to ask who it was from. Somehow, Alexander Volkov had already obtained my number. As I drifted off to sleep, one thought kept circling in my exhausted mind. What exactly would I be agreeing to if I said yes? The answer came sooner than expected, in the form of a loud pounding on my door at 7 a.m. Groggy and disoriented, I stumbled to answer it, expecting my chronically confused elderly neighbor who occasionally forgot which apartment was hers. Instead, I found myself facing the expressionless bodyguard from last night. "Ms. Collins," he said with a curt nod. "Mr. Volkov requests your presence for breakfast." "Excuse me?" I blinked at the bodyguard, certain I was still half asleep and misunderstanding. "Breakfast? Now?" "Yes, ma'am." His expression remained impassive. "The car is waiting." I glanced down at my faded pajamas and tangled hair. "I'm not exactly ready for—" "You have 15 minutes to prepare yourself," he interrupted, checking his watch. "Mr. Volkov is on a tight schedule this morning." Before I could protest further, he stepped back. "I'll wait here." I closed the door, leaning against it for a moment as I tried to process this new development. Clearly, Alexander Volkov was a man accustomed to getting his way, and apparently, my 48 hours for consideration had been reduced to join me for breakfast immediately. Part of me wanted to refuse on principle, to reassert some control over this runaway situation, but curiosity, and if I was being honest, hunger, won out. I rushed through the fastest shower of my life, threw on a simple dress that I hoped looked somewhat presentable, and attempted to tame my hair into submission. 14 minutes later, I emerged to find the bodyguard exactly where I'd left him. "Mr. Volkov appreciates punctuality," he commented, the barest hint of approval in his voice as he escorted me downstairs. The same black Bentley waited at the curb, but Alexander wasn't inside. Instead, the bodyguard opened the door for me, then took his place in the front passenger seat. "Where are we going?" I asked as we pulled away from my building. "Mr. Volkov's residence," came the terse reply. I watched the city transform around us as we drove, modest neighborhoods giving way to increasingly affluent ones. Finally, we turned onto a private drive, guarded by an imposing gate that opened automatically as we approached. The house, though mansion would be more accurate, sprawled before us, a modernist structure of glass, steel, and stone, nestled among manicured gardens. 2 more security personnel stood at the entrance, nodding respectfully as the bodyguard led me inside. The interior was just as impressive as the exterior: soaring ceilings, museum-quality art, and furnishings that managed to be both luxurious and minimalist. "This way," the bodyguard directed, leading me through the house to a sunlit terrace overlooking an infinity pool and the city beyond. Alexander stood at the edge of the terrace, his back to me, speaking quietly into a phone. Even in this private setting, he wore an impeccably tailored suit, his posture rigid with authority. He turned as we approached, ending his call immediately. "Emily," he said, his expression softening slightly. "Thank you for joining me." Up close, in the morning light, I could see details I'd missed the night before. The faint lines at the corners of his eyes, a small scar near his temple, the way his eyes shifted from blue to almost gray depending on how the light hit them. "Your invitation was rather insistent," I replied, trying to keep my tone light despite my irritation. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I've found that waiting rarely improves situations." He gestured to the table set for 2. "Please, sit." We have much to discuss. The breakfast spread was as extravagant as dinner had been. Fresh fruit, pastries, smoked salmon, eggs prepared 3 different ways. A server appeared silently to pour coffee and fresh orange juice before disappearing back into the house. "Did you sleep well?" Alexander asked, his intensity somewhat at odds with the mundane question. "As well as could be expected, given the circumstances," I answered honestly, helping myself to a croissant. "I thought I had 48 hours to consider your proposal." "You do." He sipped his coffee. "This isn't about pressuring you for an answer." This is about providing you with all the information you need to make that decision. Including where you live? I gestured to our opulent surroundings. Including what your life would look like, should you accept. He set down his cup, leaning forward slightly. I don't believe in uninformed choices, Emily. There was something refreshing about his directness, even as it unnerved me. All right then, inform me. If you agree to become my wife, you would live here. You would have your own suite of rooms initially, though I would expect us to share a bedroom eventually. His gaze was unwavering. You would have a clothing allowance, a personal assistant, access to my private physician for your prenatal care, and a driver at your disposal. I nearly choked on my orange juice. That sounds more like a job offer than a marriage. In some ways, it would be both, he conceded. There would be certain expectations, accompanying me to business functions, maintaining appropriate appearances, learning to navigate certain social circles. And in return, financial security, both for you and your child. The baby would bear my name, have the best education, opportunities, connections. You would never have to worry about providing for your child's needs. He paused, studying my face. And you would have my protection. There it was again. That emphasis on protection that seemed to carry hidden meaning. Protection from what, exactly? I asked. Alexander's expression hardened. The world can be dangerous for a woman alone, especially one in vulnerable circumstances. Even more so for a child. And what about physical aspects? I forced myself to ask, heat rising to my cheeks. Would you expect— Yes, he interrupted, his voice dropping slightly. Eventually. I won't pretend otherwise, but not until you're comfortable, and certainly not while you're pregnant. I stared at my plate, processing his blunt response. At least he was honest. What about love? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Alexander was quiet for so long that I finally looked up. His expression had softened into something almost vulnerable. I believe respect and loyalty can grow into something meaningful, he said carefully. I'm not offering you a fairy tale, Emily. I'm offering you certainty in an uncertain world. For some reason, his answer affected me more than flowery promises would have. There was a pragmatism to it that resonated with my current reality. And if I say no? I asked, needing to understand all my options. Then I would still like to help you, he said, surprising me. A job in one of my companies, perhaps. Some assistance until you're back on your feet. His eyes met mine. I don't make a habit of abandoning people in need, especially not expectant mothers. His generosity, however conditional, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I blinked them back furiously, blaming hormones. Why? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why would you do any of this for a complete stranger? Something flickered across his face, a shadow of old pain quickly concealed. Let's just say I understand what it means to be alone and vulnerable. Before I could press further, his phone vibrated on the table. He glanced at it, frowning slightly. Business, he explained, standing. Please, continue eating. I need to take this call, but I'll be back shortly. Feel free to explore the terrace. As he stepped away to take his call, I found myself studying him from a distance. Even in this private moment, there was an alertness to him, a constant awareness of his surroundings. I noticed how his security staff positioned themselves discreetly, but strategically around the property. The way Alexander kept his voice low, his back to the wall rather than the open space of the garden. Who exactly was Alexander Volkov? And what kind of business required such intense security measures? My thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of a sleek tablet, presented by the silent server who'd been attending our breakfast. Mr. Volkov thought you might be interested in reviewing these, she explained softly, setting the device before me. The screen displayed what appeared to be legal documents, a prenuptial agreement, from what I could gather as I scrolled through. The terms were surprisingly generous. In the event of a divorce, I would receive a substantial settlement, a housing allowance, and continued support for the child. The only conditions were related to confidentiality and loyalty during the marriage. I set the tablet down, feeling overwhelmed. This was moving too fast, becoming too real, yet I couldn't deny the security it offered. Not just for me, but for my baby. Alexander returned, his expression giving nothing away about his call. I see you've been reviewing the preliminary agreement. Preliminary? I echoed. Of course. It would be customized to address any specific concerns you might have. He resumed his seat, studying me. You look troubled. I let out a short, incredulous laugh. Wouldn't you be? 24 hours ago, I was just a pregnant, jobless woman with no prospects. Now I'm having breakfast at a mansion, reviewing prenuptial agreements with a man I barely know. Alexander nodded, conceding the point. It's a lot to process. That's an understatement. I took a deep breath. I need to understand what I'd be getting into. Not just the perks and the protection, but the reality of who you are, what you do. His expression turned guarded. My business dealings are complex and, frankly, not something I discuss in detail with anyone. I'm not asking for trade secrets, I clarified. But if I'm considering binding my life, and my child's life, to yours, I need to know if I'm walking into something illegal. Alexander's eyes narrowed slightly. An understandable concern. My primary businesses operate entirely within legal parameters. Import, export, real estate development, investment. I have holdings in several legitimate enterprises across the city. I noticed he said primary businesses, implying there were others. And the careful phrasing, operate within legal parameters, felt deliberate. But, I prompted. But, he acknowledged with a slight inclination of his head. I come from a world where business and family connections are complicated. My associates are not always as scrupulous as I am. You're talking about the Russian Mafia, I said bluntly, the pieces finally clicking into place. The security, the power, the way people reacted to him at the restaurant. Alexander didn't flinch. I prefer to think of it as an extended family with diverse business interests. Is that supposed to be reassuring? It's the truth, he replied simply. And it's the reason I need a wife, a family. Certain transitions in leadership require stability, tradition. I stared at him, trying to reconcile the sophisticated businessman across from me with the implications of what he was saying. So I'd be marrying into the mob. You'd be marrying me, he corrected, leaning forward. And I would ensure that neither you nor the child ever had any contact with the less savory aspects of my associations. My mind was reeling. This was insanity, considering marriage to a man with ties to organized crime. And yet, a small voice whispered, would struggling alone really be better for my child? I need time, I said finally. Real time. Not just until tomorrow. Alexander studied me for a long moment. 3 days, he offered. I can give you that much. But Emily, his voice softened. Remember that your safety is my primary concern. The longer you remain unprotected, the more vulnerable you are. The way he said it sent a chill through me. Am I in danger? Not specifically, he replied carefully. But your situation, pregnant, alone, financially unstable, makes you an easy target in general. Before I could question him further, the bodyguard who had escorted me appeared at the edge of the terrace, his expression urgent. He approached Alexander, whispering something in his ear that made Alexander's entire demeanor change in an instant. Take her inside, Alexander ordered, rising abruptly. Secure room. The bodyguard moved with startling speed, grasping my arm firmly but not roughly. Ms. Collins, please come with me immediately. What's happening? I asked, alarmed by the sudden shift. Alexander's face had transformed into something cold and dangerous. We have unwelcome visitors. It's nothing to concern yourself with, but I need you safe. The bodyguard, whose name I still didn't know, led me swiftly through the house, his grip on my arm brooking no argument. Behind us, I heard Alexander barking orders in what sounded like Russian, his voice harsh and commanding in a way I hadn't heard before. What's going on? I tried again as we descended a staircase I hadn't noticed earlier. Security protocol, the bodyguard replied tersely. Mr. Volkov will explain later. We entered what appeared to be a private office suite, but he continued to a back wall where he pressed his palm against a seemingly ordinary wooden panel. A hidden door swung open, revealing a small but well-appointed room. Comfortable seating, a mini bar, and what looked like security monitors showing various angles of the property. Please remain here until Mr. Volkov comes for you, he instructed, finally releasing my arm. The room is secure. Secure from what? I demanded. But he was already stepping back through the doorway. Everything you need is here. Water, food, bathroom through there. He gestured to another door. The door will lock automatically. Only Mr. Volkov and I have access. With that, he closed the door, leaving me alone in what was essentially a luxurious panic room. I heard the soft click of the lock engaging, and fought a momentary wave of claustrophobia. I was locked in a stranger's house, in a hidden room, with no idea what was happening. The rational part of me knew I should be terrified, possibly looking for another way out. Instead, I found myself drawn to the security monitors, seeking answers. The screens showed the front gate, where 2 black SUVs had pulled up. Men in dark suits, not unlike Alexander's security team, stood outside, apparently in some kind of standoff with Alexander's people. I couldn't see Alexander on any of the screens, but the tension was palpable even through the silent feed. After several tense minutes, the SUVs retreated, backing away from the gate. I watched as Alexander's security maintained their positions, no one relaxing until the vehicles had disappeared from view. 20 minutes passed before the door finally opened again. Alexander entered alone, his expression carefully controlled, but with a tightness around his eyes that hadn't been there before. "I apologize for the interruption," he said formally. "Are you going to tell me what that was about?" I asked, crossing my arms over my chest. He considered me for a moment. Business associates who arrived unannounced. It was impolite. And that required locking me in a panic room? It required ensuring your safety, he corrected. My world can be unpredictable at times. I prefer to err on the side of caution. This is what it would be like, isn't it? I asked quietly. Being rushed to safety whenever something happens. Never knowing the full story. Alexander moved further into the room, maintaining a respectful distance. Initially, perhaps, until certain matters are resolved. His expression softened marginally. "It wouldn't always be like this, Emily. But it is like this now," I pointed out. "And you want me to bring a child into this situation." Something flickered in his eyes, regret perhaps. "I want to provide safety and security for you and your child. Sometimes that means protective measures that might seem extreme." I sank onto one of the plush chairs, suddenly exhausted. This is all too much. 24 hours ago, my biggest problem was figuring out how to make rent while pregnant. Now I'm hiding from mysterious business associates in a panic room. Alexander surprised me by kneeling before my chair, bringing himself to eye level. Up close, I could see the faint shadows beneath his eyes, a small nick on his jaw from shaving. Humanizing details that contrasted with the powerful, dangerous aura he projected. "I understand this is overwhelming," he said, his voice gentler than I'd heard it before. "But consider this. Your current situation offers no protection at all. At least with me, you would have resources, security." "At what cost?" I whispered. His eyes held mine steadily. "Your independence to some degree. Your anonymity, but never your dignity or your safety." I looked away, unable to hold his intense gaze. "I need to go home. I need to think." "Of course." He stood smoothly, extending a hand to help me up. "I'll have Dimitri drive you." As we made our way back upstairs, I couldn't help noticing the subtle signs that something significant had occurred. Security personnel speaking quietly into earpieces, a vase of flowers that had been knocked over and hastily righted, the lingering tension in the air. Alexander escorted me to the front door himself, where the Bentley already waited. Before I could step outside, he took my hand gently. "Emily," he said softly, "whatever you decide, call me if you need anything, day or night." There was genuine concern in his eyes, and something else I couldn't quite identify. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and slipped into the waiting car. The drive back to my apartment passed in silence, my mind too chaotic to formulate coherent thoughts. Only as we pulled up to my building did a new worry surface. What if whoever had come to Alexander's house followed us here? Dimitri, seemingly reading my mind, spoke for the first time since we'd left. "I will escort you inside, Ms. Collins, and security will monitor your building until Mr. Volkov's personal team arrives." "Personal team?" I echoed. 2 of our people will be stationed nearby for your protection, he explained matter-of-factly. Regardless of your decision regarding Mr. Volkov's proposal, I wasn't sure whether to be comforted or alarmed by this information. Is that really necessary? Dmitri's expression remained neutral. Mr. Volkov believes it is. Too exhausted to argue, I allowed him to escort me upstairs. He performed a quick but thorough check of my apartment before nodding, apparently satisfied. The team will be in place within the hour, he informed me. You will not see them, but they will be watching. If you need anything, use this. He handed me what looked like a normal smartphone. Press the side button 3 times rapidly for emergency assistance. With that, he left, leaving me standing in my shabby apartment that suddenly felt both like a sanctuary and a prison. I sank onto my couch, the events of the morning replaying in my mind. The contrast between Alexander's world and mine couldn't have been starker. His mansion with its panic rooms and security teams versus my 1-bedroom walk-up with its leaky faucet and temperamental heating. His world of power, danger, and luxury versus my struggle for basic stability. And yet, he wanted to bring me into his world, to claim my child as his own. To offer protection I desperately needed, but at a cost I wasn't sure I could pay. I placed my hand on my still flat abdomen, thinking of the tiny life growing inside me. What kind of future could I offer this child on my own? Constant financial struggle, inadequate health care, maybe even homelessness if I couldn't find work soon. And what kind of future would my baby have as Alexander Volkov's child? The best of everything, certainly. But also danger, secrets, and a father whose business associates prompted panic room protocols. My phone, my regular one, chimed with a text message, pulling me from my thoughts. Unknown number, but I knew who it was from before I even read it. Check your email. A. Sure enough, an email from a Volkov had arrived in my inbox moments earlier. The subject line read simply, "For your consideration," and the body of the email contained only a brief message. Medical coverage effective immediately, regardless of your decision. First appointment scheduled for tomorrow at 10 a.m. if acceptable. Car will be waiting at 9:30. Attached were insurance documents showing comprehensive health coverage, including prenatal care, under a corporate plan from one of Alexander's companies. My name was already listed as a covered employee. I stared at the screen, tears welling in my eyes. He had arranged health insurance for me, for my baby, without conditions. It was the one concern that had been keeping me awake at night, the fear of inadequate prenatal care or crushing medical debt. Before I could process this development, someone knocked at my door. Warily, I approached, remembering Dmitri's warning about security teams. "Who is it?" I called. "Delivery for Emily Collins," came the reply. I opened the door cautiously to find a courier holding a large garment bag and a smaller package. "Sign here, please," he said, offering an electronic pad. After he left, I unzipped the garment bag to find an elegant maternity dress in deep burgundy, along with appropriate shoes and accessories. The smaller package contained prenatal vitamins, ginger tea for morning sickness, and a note in Alexander's strong handwriting. For tomorrow's appointment, the doctor prefers business attire. I sat on the edge of my bed, fingering the soft fabric of the dress. It was beautiful, expensive, and exactly my size. The gesture was thoughtful and presumptuous in equal measure, just like Alexander himself. My phone chimed again. "Is the dress acceptable? If not, alternatives can be arranged." I found myself smiling despite everything. The man didn't miss a detail. "The dress is beautiful," I replied. "Thank you. And thank you for the insurance. Your well-being is my priority, Emily. Sleep well." I set the phone down, still torn between gratitude and wariness. Alexander Volkov was dangerous. Of that I had no doubt after this morning's events. But he was also offering a solution to every problem currently crushing me. Could I really consider marrying a man tied to the Russian Mafia? Becoming the wife of someone whose business dealings prompted armed standoffs, raising my child in that world? The practical side of me argued that Alexander's world, with all its danger, still offered more security than my current situation. At least with him, the threats would be known, anticipated, guarded against. On my own, I was vulnerable to everything: eviction, poverty, inadequate healthcare, the everyday dangers faced by a single woman with no support system. I fell into an exhausted sleep, still wearing my clothes, no closer to a decision than I had been that morning. The next day passed in a blur of medical appointments. Not just the promised OB/GYN visit, but a full workup with specialists I could never have afforded on my own. Alexander didn't attend, but his presence was felt in every preferential treatment, every Mr. Volkov has arranged. That smoothed my way. The burgundy dress fit perfectly, earning approving nods from the medical staff clearly accustomed to Alexander's associates. The doctor confirmed my pregnancy was progressing normally, but recommended additional vitamins and more rest, luxury items in my previous reality. By evening, I was back in my apartment, surrounded by prenatal vitamins, pregnancy books, and healthy food that had been delivered while I was out. Alexander hadn't contacted me all day, giving me the space I'd requested, but his influence permeated everything around me now, from the security I couldn't see, but knew was there, to the material comforts suddenly appearing in my life. As darkness fell, I found myself drawn to the window. Looking out at the city lights, somewhere out there, Alexander was waiting for my decision. A decision that would irrevocably change my life and my child's future forever. My phone rang, startling me. Not Alexander's number, but one I recognized with a jolt of dread. Ryan. After everything that had happened, I'd almost forgotten about him, the actual father of my baby, the man who'd abandoned me when I needed him most. My hand shook as I answered. Hello? Emily. Ryan's voice, once so beloved, now set my teeth on edge. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about, Ryan. I fought to keep my voice steady, one hand instinctively moving to my stomach in a protective gesture. Come on, babe, don't be like that. His voice held that cajoling tone I once found charming. Now it just sounded manipulative. Stacy and I had a fight. I've been thinking about you. Of course. His fling with my former roommate had hit a rough patch, so he was circling back to his backup plan. I almost laughed at the predictability. How did you even get this number? I changed it after you left. After he emptied our joint account and disappeared without a word, to be precise. Stacy still had it. Look, I made a mistake, okay? I want to make things right. It's too late for that. I moved away from the window, suddenly conscious that Alexander's security might be watching. The thought of them witnessing this conversation made me straighten my spine, find my resolve. At least meet me for coffee, Ryan pressed. Tomorrow? The place near your work, like we used to? I don't work there anymore. I took a deep breath. And I'm pregnant, Ryan, with your child. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Are you sure it's mine? He finally asked. White-hot anger flashed through me. Considering you were the only person I was with for the past year? Yes, I'm quite sure. Shit, Emily. I'm not ready for a kid. You know that. Neither was I. But here we are, I replied coldly. What do you expect me to do? His voice had turned defensive, almost accusatory. I can barely cover my own rent right now. I closed my eyes, remembering exactly why he couldn't cover his rent. Because he'd spent our savings on his new life with Stacy. I don't expect anything from you, Ryan. I just thought you should know. We could, there are options, he suggested haltingly. My free hand curled into a fist. No, I'm keeping this baby. Then I don't know what you want from me, he said, frustration evident in his voice. I can't afford child support. I don't want anything from you, I interrupted, surprised to find it was true. Not anymore. There was a pause. Then his voice changed, becoming suspicious. Wait, how are you managing then? You always said you could barely make rent yourself. I thought of Alexander, of the security teams watching my building, the health insurance, the prenatal vitamins neatly arranged on my counter. I've found support elsewhere. Another guy? Ryan's tone shifted to incredulous. Already? And he's cool with you being knocked up? Goodbye, Ryan, I said firmly, ending the call before he could respond. I blocked his number immediately, my hand still shaking slightly. Just like that, the last thread connecting me to my old life had been severed. Ryan wasn't going to step up, wasn't going to provide for our child. Not that I'd expected him to, but hearing his reaction, the immediate attempt to deny responsibility, to suggest options, solidified something in me. My child deserved better, deserved a father who would protect rather than abandon, provide rather than take. I looked around my small apartment, at the evidence of Alexander's influence already creeping in. The expensive prenatal vitamins, the designer maternity dress hanging in my closet, the security I couldn't see but knew was there. Was this a glimpse of what life with him would be like? Protection, provision, but also control, danger lurking at the edges? My phone chimed with a text, Alexander, as if conjured by my thoughts. All well after your appointments today? I hesitated, then typed, Yes, everything's fine. Thank you for arranging them. His response came quickly. It was my pleasure. Have you eaten this evening? The question was so ordinary, so domestic. It almost made me smile despite everything. Yes, the food delivery was very thoughtful. Good. You're taking care of two now. Before I could respond, another message appeared. Ryan called you. It wasn't a question. I froze, staring at the screen. How could he possibly know that? Had my phone been tapped? Were Alexander's security people reporting my every move? Are you monitoring my calls? I typed, anger flaring. No, came the immediate response. He was spotted approaching your building earlier. I assumed he would attempt contact. My anger deflated slightly, still invasive, but marginally less so than actual surveillance of my conversations. He wanted to meet, I admitted. I told him about the baby. There was a longer pause this time, and nothing, I replied. He suggested options and complained about not being able to afford child support. Another pause. I see. Something in those two simple words sent a chill down my spine. Alexander, don't do anything. It doesn't matter. I blocked his number. Of course it matters, he responded, but we can discuss this tomorrow. It's been a long day, and you need rest. He was right about that, at least. Emotional exhaustion weighed on me like a physical thing. Good night, Alexander. Good night, Emily. Sleep well. I plugged my phone in to charge and prepared for bed, my mind still churning with the decision looming before me. Ryan's call had clarified some things, at least. I was truly on my own, or I would be, without Alexander's offer. That night, I dreamed of locked rooms and gilded cages, of protection that felt like imprisonment. I woke gasping, my hand protectively covering my stomach. Dawn was just breaking, pale light filtering through my thin curtains. I made myself tea, the ginger variety Alexander had sent, and sat by the window, watching the city wake up. In just 2 days, my decision deadline would arrive. I had to choose. Independence with all its struggles and insecurities, or Alexander's world with its protection and dangers. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. Unknown number, not Alexander's. Warily, I answered. Ms. Collins? A woman's crisp, professional voice. This is Sandra Hayes from Meridian Insurance HR department. I'm calling regarding an incident involving one of our former employees, Ryan Thorne. My heart rate accelerated. What kind of incident? Mr. Thorne was caught attempting to access confidential company files early this morning. Security has detained him, and upon questioning, he became quite agitated. He mentioned your name several times, making some concerning statements. What kind of statements? I asked, though I already suspected. Threats, Ms. Collins, specifically directed at you and, your condition. Her voice softened slightly. Given the nature of his comments, we felt obligated to warn you. The police have been notified. I sank onto my couch, my free hand again moving protectively to my abdomen. Thank you for letting me know. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. Ryan had never been violent during our relationship, but he'd always had a temper. Finding out about the pregnancy must have pushed him over some edge, and now he was making threats. Against me, against our baby. My phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. Stay inside. Car coming in 15 minutes. He knew. Somehow, he already knew about Ryan. I should have been disturbed by how plugged in he seemed to be, how quickly information reached him. Instead, I felt only relief. I dressed quickly, throwing essentials into a small bag. True to his word, exactly 15 minutes later, I received another text. Car outside, Dimitri waiting. I hurried downstairs to find the now familiar Bentley, Dimitri standing beside it with a watchful expression. He opened the door without a word, his eyes constantly scanning the street. "Mr. Volkov is expecting you," he said as we pulled away from the curb. "How did he know?" I asked. "About Ryan?" Dimitri's eyes met mine briefly in the rearview mirror. "Mr. Volkov has connections in many places. It is his business to know things." The rest of the drive passed in silence. When we arrived at Alexander's mansion, I was escorted directly to what appeared to be a study. Warm wood paneling, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk overlooking the gardens. Alexander stood as I entered, concern evident in his expression. "Emily, are you all right?" "I'm fine," I assured him. "Just shaken." He gestured to a comfortable chair near a fireplace where a small fire burned despite the mild weather. "Sit, please. Would you like tea? Something stronger, perhaps?" "Tea would be nice," I admitted, sinking into the chair. "How did you know about Ryan?" Alexander took the seat opposite mine, his posture perfect even in this informal setting. "I have people at Meridian. When Ryan was detained, I was notified immediately." "Of course you do," I murmured, not even surprised anymore. A slight smile touched his lips. "Is it so terrible to have connections that keep you informed, that keep you safe?" Before I could answer, an older woman entered with a tea service, setting it on the small table between us before departing silently. Alexander prepared my tea exactly as I preferred it, something he'd apparently noticed at our previous meals. The gesture, small but thoughtful, touched me unexpectedly. "Ryan never posed a threat before," I said, accepting the cup. "He was selfish, irresponsible, but never dangerous." "Men like Ryan become dangerous when cornered," Alexander replied, his voice hardening slightly, "when their self-image is threatened. Learning about the pregnancy, being caught breaking into his former workplace. These things made him desperate." I sipped my tea, considering his words. "The HR woman said he made threats, about me and the baby." Something dangerous flashed in Alexander's eyes. "Yes, threats he will never have the opportunity to carry out." A chill ran through me. "What does that mean? What did you do?" "Nothing yet," he assured me, his tone gentler. "But you need to understand, Emily. In my world, threats against family are never tolerated. Never." "I'm not your family," I pointed out quietly. Alexander set down his cup, leaning forward slightly. "But you could be. You and the child." The moment stretched between us, weighted with possibility. Finally, I asked the question that had been haunting me. "Why me, Alexander? Really? There must be women in your world who understand the lifestyle, the dangers. Women with connections, influence. Why choose a pregnant administrative assistant with nothing to offer?" His expression softened, vulnerability showing through his carefully controlled facade. "Because you have no agenda, no family ties to rival interests. No ambitions within my world." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "And because when we spoke that first time, when you called the wrong number, you were honest. Vulnerable but not weak. That combination is rare in my experience." I looked away, unable to hold his intense gaze. "And if I say yes, what happens then?" "Then we proceed as discussed. Marriage, eventually. You move in here, where I can ensure your safety. The child is born with my name, my protection." His voice dropped slightly. "And in time, perhaps we build something genuine between us." "And if I say no?" Alexander's expression remained calm, but something flickered in his eyes. "Then I respect your decision. The security team remains in place, as does your health coverage. I find you suitable employment in one of my legitimate businesses. And I ensure Ryan never comes near you or the child." I stared at him, realization dawning. "You're still offering to protect me even if I refuse to marry you?" "Of course." He seemed almost surprised by my confusion. "The child deserves protection regardless of your decision. And you—" He hesitated. "You deserve better than fear and uncertainty." In that moment, I saw beyond the dangerous businessman, beyond the Mafia connections and security protocols. I saw a man shaped by his own code, one that placed protection of the vulnerable above all else. "Did someone fail to protect you, Alexander?" I asked softly. "Is that why this matters so much to you?" Pain flashed across his face before he could mask it. "My mother," he said quietly. "She was in a vulnerable position, with a child, without protection." He looked away. It didn't end well for her. Understanding bloomed within me. This wasn't just about business interests or appearing respectable. This was personal for him, deeply, painfully personal. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. He nodded once in acknowledgement. "So, now you understand why I made the offer, why I will protect you and the child regardless of your answer." I set down my teacup, a strange calm settling over me. In the most unexpected way, through the most unusual circumstances, I had found someone who prioritized my safety, my child's future, above all else. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something solid, something I could build upon. "Yes," I said simply. Alexander went very still. "Yes, I accept your proposal." I met his gaze steadily. "But I have conditions." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I would expect nothing less. Name them." "Complete honesty between us, always. I need to know what I'm facing, what dangers might affect our child." He nodded. "Within reason. Some details of my business are better left unknown." "Fair enough." "Second, I finished my degree. I was 3 credits short when money ran out. I want to complete it. Done." "Anything else?" I took a deep breath. If this is going to work, if we're really going to try to build something genuine, then it can't be just a business arrangement. I need to know you're committed to trying, to seeing me as a partner, not just a convenience. Alexander rose, crossing the small space between us. He knelt before my chair, taking my hands in his. "Emily Collins, I am many things, some of them not admirable, but I am always a man of my word." His thumbs brushed gently over my knuckles. "I commit to trying, to seeing you as the remarkable woman you are, and to being a father to your child in every way that matters." As he sealed his promise with a gentle kiss to my hand, I knew my life had irrevocably changed. I was entering a world of power and danger, of luxury and secrets, but I would face it with a man who understood protection, who valued loyalty above all. And my child, our child now, would grow up safe, provided for, and with a father who would move heaven and earth to keep them from harm. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but for a woman who had called the wrong number in her darkest moment, it was something far more valuable, a future I could believe in.